All right, I feel we can get started now. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being here. This is the AILA's monthly special interest group. Basically, this every month we change the topic of discussion based off of current events or community inputs. And so this month, we're talking about AI and remote sensing. We have an open innovation challenge that we just announced last week, working with LA County to focus on detecting invasive pests within the LA County forestry. And so we thought it'd be pretty appropriate to have some brilliant people that are working with satellite data and remote sensing to discuss their work, and then go into a fireside chat to further discuss, again, how AI is being used within remote sensing and satellite imagery. And so today we are really fortunate to have Suye and Jennifer Booz and Ashwath Raj here to have a conversation. And so the format will be very basic. Suye will go first with about a 15-minute presentation. After that, Jennifer will go another 15-minute presentation, and that will follow with Ashwath, moderating, facilitating a conversation between both of our presenters. Now, if you ever have a question or comment, feel free to use the chat in the box to the right, and we'll be able to have more Q&A at the very end of this. And so please, for housekeeping rules, keep your mics and videos off, and we'll allow the presenters to present. And so without further ado, we're going to go off screen, and Suye, you're going to present. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you for introduction, Todd. Let me share my screen. Can you see my slides now?
Yes.
Oh, no, that's the hand to swap. Okay. Hello, everyone, and my name is Suye, and I'm currently the postdoc researcher at the Global Environmental Remote Sensing Laboratory in University of Connecticut, and I got my PhD degrees at Clark University in Massachusetts, majoring in geography, and just last year. Today I will be presenting my research for my past 2 years about detecting insect disturbance from Landsat time series. Some background here, we've been seeing many reports showing like a significantly increasing trend of insect activities in recent 10 years. This is mainly triggered by the climate warming. Also, many predictions have showing like the temperature would continue increase for this century. So it's very likely like the insect or pest disturbance will be increasing for future. So we are studying the insect disturbance not for now, also for future. The right figure here is the field photo I took from my field work in Colorado, Rocky Mountain. Actually, I was shocked the first time being there. There are most 90% trees being killed by the beetle infestations. So very severe, and I've been seeing a lot of trees lost there. So that's the reason we want to study the insect. Okay, my research, I think actually this is one of my research interests is detect the insect disturbance as early as possible. Also, I want to study the ecological consequence of this insect disturbance. The primary satellite resources I use is Landsat. I'm not sure the background of audience here, probably you already know this satellite very well, but I just give a brief introduction in case. Landsat program actually is the longest running enterprise for satellite imagery in the whole human history. It provides continuous observations at a 30-meter resolution of our Earth's surface since 1982. So we can have like 40 or 50 years continuous observations. That's a very valuable data resource archive. There are several advantages of why I choose Landsat images for study or for detecting the insect activities. The first reason is Landsat dataset has the highest standard of data calibrations, also quality bands. This is especially important if we want to detect insect disturbance, which is often very subtle, have a very subtle change signals. Data quality, data consistency can directly relate to the accuracy of our detection results. You think about if for a data set that have a lot of noise, then these subtle signals could be very easily diluted with this noise. That's the reason why I think the first reason I picked the Landsat images. Second is it can provide a long-term baseline for disturbance monitoring. This point is very important for time series analysis. Later I will introduce. Baseline for time series analysis, we usually will use a baseline information. In another word, we should call it like a historical variabilities to characterize a stable stage. Then we use these models to continuously detect or monitor if any anomaly event will happen. So this baseline information could provide very important like historical variability informations. So the longer baseline, the better the detection result would be. The third is acceptable. The Landsat have a acceptable temporal density. Here I think acceptable because I mean to compare with the planet images, which usually have 1 day revisiting days. Landsat satellites only have 8 days revisiting cycle, so it's not have a best temporal densities. But if we combine Landsat with another well-known also very similar satellite sensor called Sentinel-2, we probably can get like 3 days revisiting cycles. So I think it's being adequate for near real-time monitoring. And thirdly, the fourth reason is Landsat dataset have a multispectral bands. Especially it has invisible, the several invisible bands, like a near infrared band, also 2 shorter infrared band. Especially for short infrared band, it's very important for our insect detections based on our past studies, because the short infrared bands are often linked to the water stress of vegetations. And if a trees have water stress, it's very likely caused by the insect, right? Also probably caused by drought, but most likely could be insect. So yeah, that's another advantage. The last one, not the least one, is it's free, and who will deny the free lunch? Okay, so that's the reason we choose Landsat. This is an example for what the Landsat time series will looks like. The mechanism here is if a disturbance happens, such like a insect disturbance, it will trigger some signals in time series, and it will cause several breaks in our time series, like showing the black line showing here. Actually, time series not just tell us the break, also we can use the spectral information to classify this break. Such like for these pixels, it's not fortunately it has like 2 consecutive disturbance in histories, below and white files. We have some techniques to detect them. Also, we can classify them based on their spectral characteristics. Classify them into different disturbance agents, such like beetle, also white file. So that's the basic mechanism of how we use Landsat time series to do the beetle detection, also agent classification. The main algorithm I relies on is called a CCDC algorithm, which is developed by the director of our lab, that Professor Zhu. I think CCDC probably is the most widely used time series algorithms for Landsat images in remote sensing domain. This is also the core algorithms for USGS LC map project, have been widely implemented in many platforms such like GE, ArcGIS, PCI, software, etc. I probably would run out of time if I explain the details of this algorithm. Put it simply, is the general idea is we can first characterize a stable stage as this model window shows. Then we will continuous using several consecutive observations. We call the peak windows to detect the breaks. So if the minimum values of the peak windows, the minimum values of change of magnitude for any observation within these peak windows larger than certain threshold, we will think the beginning of this peak window would be a break. So yeah, that's a general idea of CCDC. Based on my descriptions, you can tell like we have like two critical parameters. The first parameter is a change of magnitude threshold, which determines what's the anomaly levels we will use to separate these signals from noise. And the second is called the consecutive anomaly numbers. That's usually means the peak window length. By default, we use 6 observations. So which means like how much change durations lasts, we will think of these disturbance signals. We will mention these 2 parameters later. Okay. The CCDC was designed for like detecting generic land disturbance. Definitely, I think path disturbance is like one of the most difficult disturbance type for detection from all kinds of land disturbance, such like a fire or mechanical construction, such like path is most difficult. There are 2 reasons. The first reason is, as I mentioned, the change magnitude of insect or the infestation is usually very subtle. This is because you can think about our resolution is 30 meters by 30 meters. So in a 30 meter by 30 meter block, there could be a lot of stuff. There could be not just infested trees. It could be healthy trees and storage tree and story, also probably barren land. So all this stuff mixed together and constitute one observation values. So this observation values could very likely to be a mixed values, which causing the change signals are not that significant. So that's the first reason for the challenges. I think the second challenge is the change for certain insect species. The change duration could be very short, and such like a gypsum mouse. It's usually. I thought, how long I have speak already? Do I exceed the time limit?
Todd.
No, not at all. You've still got some time. Don't worry. Keep on going.
Okay. Yeah. So the change duration is short, then causing like our consecutive number, our peak windows are very likely to cover the recovery storage. Like for gypsum mouse, it often will recover in 2 months. Then we will cover some recovery signals, which causing the troubles. And I come up with 2 solutions. I think the first solution is this is the ideas from machine learning. We can use like a field collect samples, also machine learning algorithms to tune our the best parameters for change magnitude threshold and the consecutive anomaly numbers. Then we can build a target specific model to detect insect. That's the first idea. And also I implemented, got a very good accuracy. And the second idea is, you can think about for such like a subtle disturbance, like insect disturbance, if we will look at the signals through the time, the change magnitude could be very small. But if we look at over space, we check the neighborhood of pixels of that central pixels, we will see a lot of similar change signals happening concurrently over the space. So that's a very good important indicators for insect disturbance. They are subtle, but they have like spatial autocorrelations. So we use these ideas to develop another algorithm called object-based continuous monitoring of land disturbance. This algorithm integrates the spatial and temporal informations for detecting generic land disturbance. And but you can think about it, for many disturbances, it have such characteristics such as spatial autocorrelations. So we need to do additional step called agent classification. So first we detect the signals, then we classify these signals into different different disturbance types. So we can separate the insect signals from other signals. So there are two solutions. These are like examples of the two algorithms for the same areas. The color here represents the disturbance years detected by algorithms, and our algorithm can detect the disturbance timing as accurate as day levels. But for visualization reasons, I choose the years for map visualization. And you can see two algorithms basically provide like similar results. They are both very good. But for my own, I will choose, right now I choose the second, like we incorporate the spatial information, then we do the agent classification, because for the first solutions, it have a very strong assumption, like for one area, so it only have one agent. Then we can apply the target space models. But for most scenarios, I found like usually would be multiple disturbance types in one region. So I feel the second type of solutions, it kind of fits to more generic scenarios. Okay, some conclusions. I think insect disturbance definitely is the most challenging disturbance type for detection task. That's because it have a small change of magnitude, also short change of durations. Second, I provided two solutions. First, the target specific model. Also, second is considering like spatial information for detection. Third, I think current challenges. The first challenge is we haven't come up with a solution for distinguish insect type. That's very challenging and difficult. And the second, I think near real-time monitoring, we haven't seen any operational platform like doing insect disturbance in near real time. We are developing a system right now. And based on current progress, we've been seeing we can detect insect in 1 or 2 months later. So yeah, that's everything. Thank you.
Great. So yeah, thank you for speaking.
Yeah.
Todd, would you prefer quick questions or just move? Well, we'll return to the questions in the chat very shortly during the fireside component. And then Jennifer Buzz, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I'm happy to present. I can't share until Sue stops sharing.
Yeah, let me stop sharing. Can you share it now?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So hopefully you can see my screen. So thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I am a remote sensing scientist, so of course I am very excited to be able to talk about remote sensing to the general public this evening. So for my PhD and postdoc, I focused on remote sensing using hyperspectral imagery of Mars particularly, but also the Moon and Venus. And now that I'm at Orbital Sidekick, I'm using the same technology, which is hyperspectral imagery, to look at Earth and explore Earth applications for hyperspectral imagery. And as was mentioned at the beginning of this, I saw that AILA is having this innovation challenge. And of course, this is a timely event tonight. And so it's for $10,000 to help protect LA County trees from invasive pests. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit about some of what I think could be useful from Orbital Sidekick for this project. And I'll point out here that Landsat 8 data is what's being provided for this challenge. And so Sue just talked about Landsat a fair bit, and I'll talk about it as well. But before I get into that, I wanted to just explain what is hyperspectral imagery, which is basically what we do at Orbital Sidekick. So if you think about a monochrome picture, this is like a grayscale or a black and white image from ye old times. Then we've got RGB or true color. This is basically the kind of image your phone would take. Then we have Landsat and Sentinel. This is called multispectral. And usually these are acquired using filters on a camera. And you could get anywhere from like, 4 to 10 or so different wavelengths of light. And then we go into hyperspectral. And so this is where Orbital Sidekick comes in. We provide imagery that's in about 472 spectral channels. So you get pretty much a full spectrum from the visible to the near infrared. And so when you analyze an image with these different data sources, for example, if you look at an RGB image or a true color image, you basically get information on the light at blue, green, and red wavelengths. But when you look at something in the hyperspectral domain, you get this full series of measurements, and you can start to look into things such as water content or chlorophyll content or other parameters. Those are specific for plants, but you can also look at minerals, for example. And then Landsat Next is coming out in the late 2020s. And this will be the kind of the first big thing that's going to be considered super spectral. So I think it's supposed to have 20 wavelengths of light that it's interrogating. So Orbital Sidekick, our deal is global persistent monitoring with hyperspectral satellites. And so this is just a little schematic. By next year, 2023, we will have 6 hyperspectral satellites in orbit. So 3 are going up this year and 3 will go up at the beginning of next year. And with these 6 satellites, we'll actually be able to do up to daily imagery of pretty much anywhere on Earth. And again, using this hyperspectral data, we can get at much more than you can see with just your naked eye. So here's just a picture of some gas pipes. And with the naked eye, you can't really see a gas leak. But when you look at hyperspectral data, you do start to see things like in the visible near infrared, especially in the infrared, there are certain wavelengths of light that are absorbing. And you can pick up gas leaks, for example. And so all of our data will be available to users through our Sigma user platform. And so those interested in monitoring particular assets that they have can go and look at hyperspectral data over them or just do general research. So just a little bit more on hyperspectral data and its applications. Here's some of the things that are kind of big for us right now. We've got methane leak detection, oil spill detection in really remote areas. This is very important along the like national pipelines that we've got. Landslides and erosion. Mineral exploration, we're actually able to pick up really minute traces of elements and rare minerals. And of course, relevant to today's presentation, vegetation speciation and also vegetation health. And I'll get into that more, but and lastly, just right-of-way intrusions along different infrastructure that needs to be monitored. So an example of how we use hyperspectral data. This data that's shown in this example was actually acquired using our HEIST instrument, which was our first instrument in space. It was on the space station. And looking at wavelengths where water is important, as well as chlorophyll, we're able to come up with metrics to pinpoint where there's a high risk of fire. So, and we do that by basically figuring out where is there a lot of fire fuel or dead plant matter. And so here, this is just showing the red areas are in this scene, for example, important because they have a lot of fire fuel and could be readily burned. And lastly, I want to get into a little bit more detail on the advantages that hyperspectral imagery offers, in particular when looking at plants. So again, when you have true color, you see basically what your eye sees. And so if you have imagery of a forest or a landscape, you can get things such as like the extent of the forest. Are there burn scars? What changes there? How green are the plants, or are they brown? Is there smoke? Anything that your eye could see, that's what you would get in these true color images. Then you go to multispectral Landsat, such as what Sue was just talking about, and you can get a little bit more. You can start to get rudimentary plant classification. So using these additional bands in the infrared, you can start to put plants into different subsets. You can look at how green they are. You can also get some rudimentary plant stress indicators and health indicators. But then when you go into the hyperspectral domain, you get all of that and more. You can really start to get at chlorophyll content, water content, soil metrics, such as the electrical conductivity of the soil, the moisture of the soil. You can look at how species change with time, and you can do things like distinguishing just what's brown. It could be soil, or it could be dry leaf matter that's susceptible to burning. And so here's what a spectrum of various plants look like in the visible near infrared. So these are basically the wavelengths of light that we acquire imagery in at Orbital Sidekick. And so plants are green to us because they have chlorophyll. And so they actually reflect green and absorb in red and blue. And so that's, this peak here is the green peak. And so you can use basically how much chlorophyll is there, or what other pigments are there in a plant to do some sort of speciation. Also health. You can also look at water absorptions in the plant. You can look at things that are correlated with, for example, the leaf area index or biomass of a forest, and also look at structural properties of the plant. When plants die, you can see very clearly here how the chlorophyll absorption changes as the plant gets dry, and how the water absorptions also change. And yeah, so these spectra are different for different plants. So here are just some common crop types, and you can see there are similarities between all of the plants, but there are also some key differences. And these things can really be teased out using data science techniques. When you have information on what plant species are there, if you have some sort of ground truth, if you know, for example, how healthy the plants are, you can start to train really sophisticated models. And so here's just an example. The orange and black show what our hyperspectral data would look like. And the green and purple are what Landsat provides. So again, and these three here are what would be taken by your camera, your phone camera. So with Landsat, you do start to get more information about the plant, but then with hyperspectral data, you really can know a lot. So just a quick comparison between Landsat, which is current state of the art, and GHOST, which is our next generation of hyperspectral satellites. We will be launching 6, which again enables us up to daily target revisit rate. We'll have 472 narrow spectral bands, a similar wavelength range. And then here's another really key aspect to the data that we will be providing. We will be providing imagery at 8 meters per pixel resolution. And so you can really start to see changes and interrogate individual trees or individual clusters of trees. Vegetation is just an example I'm using now, but of course you can see how increase in resolution would really help a lot of scientific problems. And then we'll have on board a panchromatic camera that will provide basically a lot of more context, and that's up to that'll be 3 meters per pixel. So just some recent work I wanted to highlight. This is done outside of Orbital Sidekick. Here's just an example of using Landsat imagery, a classification of different tree types in boreal Alaska, and then also using hyperspectral imagery. And so this team went to this forest in boreal Alaska and did some ground truthing, and found that this like state-of-the-art product called Landfire which uses Landsat imagery, had about 33% accuracy for vegetation classification. And a lot of this is probably due to that resolution problem. So you're getting 30 meters per pixel in Landsat. And then this AVERIS data is more comparable to what Orbital Sidekick will be providing and currently provides. And when you do the exact same study, same techniques with hyperspectral data, you get closer to 80% accuracy. And here's just another related study showing how if you mimic this hyperspectral data at satellite observations, again, you start to see pretty dramatic increases in accuracy of your whatever classifier you're using. This in this example, it was for using tree type classification. And so here's just one more example of AVERIS imagery. This is over Huntington Lake and the Central Sierra Nevada, California. And in a red, green, blue image, you can see some changes in like where trees are, where they're not. But when you go into the hyperspectral domain, you can start to create really specific metrics to interrogate, for example, water stress in a plant or parameters that are correlated with leaf area index and see where things have been burned, for example. And you can see year after year how these things change, how plants are burned, how they regrow, how they die off. And so this is using actual Orbital Sidekick data over the coast of California. And so what I'm showing here are we have a true color image, and then I've created just a simple vegetation index, which is really highlighting that red edge or that reflectance increase after the chlorophyll absorption. And then using just a filter, I'm looking just at plant pixels. Now I can actually go in detail and figure out where is that red edge or where does that chlorophyll absorption end. And this is very important for plant health. And so I can actually find just individual patches of plants in this scene that are indicating stress. And so you can do really detailed work with hyperspectral data. And just here's some kind of just thoughts I had related to this AI LA challenge for how you can kind of train machine learning models or artificial intelligence, like neural network type things. This is Ecosys is a database free online that has like hundreds of spectra and also the plant biophysical parameters. And so you can go in and you can see the hyperspectral, well, in this case, these are laboratory spectra of plants, but then you know, for example, how much nitrogen is in that specific plant or how much chlorophyll is there, how much water is there. And then similarly, this is a data from Los Angeles that's publicly available, where on the street level, you have information on every single tree species and also the size of the tree. And so when you have hyperspectral data that's a high enough resolution, you can train really sophisticated models to look at both species and possibly health. This particular data set only gives you tree size, but you know there's other data sets that you could tie in. And last, I just wanted to, I did a quick search on, I wanted to show kind of how this is really changing the field for plant monitoring and plant health. And so these papers are just from the last like 3 years, but basically showing machine learning and neural network, different techniques in conjunction with hyperspectral data to look specifically at, for example, funguses that are affecting crops, also different diseases and insect infestations. And so, yeah, there's just a whole, this is not nearly all of the papers that have come out in just the last couple of years on these two specific kind of newer things. So I think it's really a game changer. And then lastly, I just pulled up some news headlines, related news headlines about AI and satellite data. And these data sets from these news articles are not hyperspectral. So just a hyperspectral could offer a lot more. But hopefully I've given you a good idea of what Orbital Sidekick is, what we offer, and the advantages of hyperspectral data, and some cool ideas for what can be done with it. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Booth. So we can get started with the questions from the audience and then transition into the fireside chat. So I'll give the people who wrote questions in the chat the opportunity to say to answer their questions. I think Dr. Ye gave in-depth explanations to each of these questions. Does anybody else have any comments or questions for the speakers? No. Okay, it seems like.
So I do have a quick question, if I may.
Go ahead.
So what you presented, right? Both like Sue and Jennifer, you presented mostly models that just give point estimates, right? What can you say about the uncertainty quantification, right? For like these types of models, like confidence or credible intervals for all the relevant parameters?
Well, in the two paper examples that I gave, those went and did ground truthing, and so they were able to just like directly measure the error associated with the model result. And so for one paper, they had an accuracy of about, I think it was like 80%, and the other one was about 90%, and that was for tree species identification. For when you and that's like for looking at different classes of trees. When you try to do like subspecies or really related trees, it is not as good. But I guess the summary of what I'm trying to say is, when you have the ground truth data, which we often try to get, especially when we're developing our models, we can look at how accurate our models have been when we like hide, for example, half of the data or do some other like statistical analysis. Basically, we need the ground truth, which we do acquire when we're developing them.
I see. Thank you.
I have a question for each of the researchers, actually.
Go ahead, Jim. Oh, actually, Leonard was already indicated that they're ready.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
This question's to Jennifer. It's regarding the orbits that you have your satellite constellation in. The picture showed like a equatorial orbit, but I suspect that's not the case.
No, yeah, that's not the case. That was just like for illustrative purposes. I couldn't tell you exactly what orbit configuration our satellites are in, but I do know that we're only acquiring like during daylight, and that we are able to acquire with the 6 satellites, we're able to acquire up to daily for almost everywhere on Earth, with some exceptions because of like magnetic field limitations. But I can get back to you on the exact orbit.
But I presume it's a polar low Earth orbit type configuration. Don't know.
Could be right. I'd have to get back to you on that.
So one of the really neat things also to come out of Landsat, particularly, this was a long time ago, 20 years or so, was they had nighttime use. And so you saw the lights of Europe and the US and other developed areas. Are you trying to collect nighttime versions, or you give the satellites downtime at that point of your orbit?
So it's kind of a bit of an interplay between like data transfer and like acquiring things that are like time sensitive. So I think if there's a data transfer availability or like downlinking availability, we can acquire nighttime imagery. But the priority will be for the daytime monitoring. So I imagine that with time, we will eventually acquire the nighttime imagery once we've like gone through our first set of daytime imagery that we need to do.
Good, thank you very much.
Okay, can I go now?
Yes, Jim, for our last question from the audience.
Yes, for Su Yi, I strongly got a sense that elevation influences your data. And so I was wondering if you thought about fusing terrain maps to your data.
Okay, that's a good question actually, because I can talk this issue from several perspectives. I mean, for data preparation angles, because for so far our model doesn't incorporate any elevation data into our model. So all our model is based on spectral data. I think you raised a good question actually. I think the first reason is if we incorporate the elevation data, that means we need an additional step for preparing this data.
Right.
And because we are doing like a large area monitoring, even global area monitoring, so this definitely increases some like logistic step efforts for doing this.
But I think for like Google, for example, terrain maps are available for everything. And so you could register that data with your existing data, probably in an automated fashion, and then incorporate that into your feature set.
I think that's a good point actually, because I've been seeing someone incorporate the water level data into the time series model for studying wetland. They reach a big success. But so yeah, I think you raised a good question. I think I will consider it for future. Probably.
Okay. And the question I have for Jennifer Buzz is, I'm both a computer vision researcher and sort of an ardent photographer. And one of the things that I've noticed with foliage is that the look of the foliage can vary dramatically depending on the polarization of light that you're looking at. And you have your grayscale sensor, which is the highest resolution sensor for your data. And I was thinking if you ran that through a polarizer and took those grayscale values at different polarizations, that may allow you to squeeze a lot more data out of that high resolution grayscale sensor.
That's a really interesting point that I hadn't thought about, but I'll definitely make sure that we look into it. So thanks for that.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, I'm assuming you're applying for royalties. Okay.
Can I add one?
I just hope they're able to get these ideas to work out.
Great points. Thank you.
Can I add one comment for Jim's questions? Because I come up with the reason why we don't incorporate elevation data. Because once change happens, and many changes probably will bring changes on elevation too, and we don't have this updated elevation data. Usually elevation data could be like 10 years, just one thing. So we don't have this dynamic elevation data. That's why the reason we don't incorporate.
Well, what you might be able to do is in testing your algorithms, you may have good elevation data for a particular data set, and you could implement that as part of your process and see whether that improves your results or not for that data set. But,
okay.
So you would have a consistent data set for a particular period of time, and you might see how that influences your results, quality of your results.
You mean like static data, like a period? That's we are assuming no change happens.
Yes.
That's good. Like we're evaluating the impact of data inclusion before evaluating whether something should be static or dynamic.
Yeah.
I have it correct, Jim.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to other questions, I wanted to quickly have both of you touch on some of the challenges and opportunities once more about the various data sources we're looking at as they pertain to the Open Innovation Challenge. So just briefly, you can touch on that again.
Sure, I'm happy to start. So at least with hyperspectral data, there's definitely a challenge of too much data. So like you end up with gigabytes of of data. So that's certainly something that needs to be overcome. And that was the challenge. What was the other part of that? Sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Opportunities and challenges. Once more, opportunities and challenges.
Do I lost?
I think Jennifer froze. Oh, Jennifer, you're back.
Yeah, I don't know where I cut off, but I was trying to say that having too much data is the biggest challenge, I think, with hyperspectral data.
Great, thank you. And I definitely want to revisit that. Dr. Ye?
I think the opportunity is, for future, we have many sensors, and so far for media resolution data, at best we got like 3 days revisiting like temporal densities. In future, I'm pretty confident like we will have a 1 day like a temporal density. So that means that every day we'll get one images so that's a very good opportunity for near real time monitoring. So because I know like for many insect disturbance, we want to find them at their early stages, and then we can do something to stop them, right? So I think this is a very good opportunity from time series analysis. We can do like a near real time monitoring. Yeah,
intuitively, it seems like insect infestations or attacks can happen on the day-to-day timescale, and 3 days isn't quite sufficient to capture all of those. So great points, both of you. I quickly wanted to address one of the questions in the chat that seems pressing for hyperspectral data. What is the average computational cost you see associated with your hyperspectral versus multispectral versus RGB analysis?
Yeah, great question. So there is quite a bit more computational cost when you go into the hyperspectral domain, because like for an image that would only have 3 bands, we now have 472 bands. So some of the things we do are, for example, like principal component analysis would be reduce some of the data size, and then we also, depending on what we're looking at, we will only look at particular portions of the spectrum. So if we're looking at plants, we don't necessarily need to look at all the wavelengths. So there's some amount of kind of trimming of the data based on what we're doing. And then there's some like quick metrics that we can run on the full data cube without having to do the full computational pipeline that'll tell us kind of just whether or not our image is going to be valuable for that particular metric. So we don't have to run our entire pipeline on every single image. We can get a pretty good idea from just some quick, simple analyses that are computationally inexpensive, whether or not we should go ahead with the full data analysis.
It sounds like the variety of data options has given researchers the opportunity to explore and like really tailor these models. So
Definitely.
I want to kind of dive deeper to the UX aspect of these data sets and talk about time to science. So if you guys aren't, if everyone is not familiar with this, it's the setup, it's the data wrangling. It involves the way people interface with the data and get the data to work for them. So what are your hopes for reducing time to science in remote sensing work, which might include the ease of data availability, what data is pre-processed on different machines, and different data wrangling tools?
So from the Orbital Sidekick side, we focus a lot on, we have like a big software team, and we focus a lot on our like front end, and that's because it's the public facing side of our data. And so we don't expect every person who is interested in hyperspectral data to know all of the nuances and like physical, like physics of the system. So we try to make our data interpretable through like maps, color coding, different sorts of figures, so that an average person can get the main point of a hyperspectral image based on what they want. So, you know, for example, a suite of images that are related to vegetation, or a suite of images related to like hydrocarbons. And you can kind of look at particular aspects of the data. And for someone who's going to do the data analysis, like on the full scale, looking at the entire data set, basically just providing really good metadata and like how to calibrate all that stuff, so that the person can tailor it to whatever they're doing.
Yeah, pretty similar in our group. We did a similar things, like produce like a high level, high abstraction levels products for user to use.
Great, thank you. Yeah, one thing I definitely noticed was the ease of consumability and the directness of the graphics you both showed. So that's good to hear. And I also wanted to ask about recent technological advancements that you both are considering in your work, aside from just hyperspectral and multispectral data. So if any insights about that would be appreciated.
So you are seeing like insights on the multispectral data, how to use them?
Outside of the multi and hyperspectral data, which we spoke a lot about, what other recent technological advancements are you looking forward to? For example, Dr. Ye, you spoke very favorably about the dynamic nature and availability of Landsat data. So outside of that.
Yeah, I'm also considering like using the LiDAR data, the laser, like what's the phoneme for LiDAR? Yeah, so LiDAR data can provide like a very high accurate estimates of like a tree height, also like structure informations, which are often related to the biomass. So we can use this data to both to evaluate the consequence of the beetles. That's also one of our another interest, not just detect, but also evaluate the consequence. So that's one of my interests.
So what kind of interventions do you stage as a lab or working with other organizations to get the data from model insight to action to help mitigate the effects of these attacks?
Jennifer, do you want to say something?
I'm just curious about that aspect of the pipeline. If that's not something your teams address, that's also fine.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about the way your work is taken from the lab to the field, like how you pass on that data. For example, for a beetle attack, what restorative measures might another organization take?
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, so we're working with some, for example, different forest monitoring services. And so like part of what we're doing is kind of asking them what data is useful for them, and is it, and then they provide us ground truth data kind of in exchange. So in that way, we can take our like hyperspectral or satellite data or remote sensing data and then like directly give it to people who are working on the ground, doing lab stuff, doing lab and field work. And we work with not only with like environmental groups, like forest groups, but also agriculture and like pipeline monitoring for effects along pipelines and mining type stuff. So just like the people who are involved on the ground, basically the stakeholders will tell us what is most important from our data. So we try and tune our products towards that. I don't know if that answered your question.
Completely did. It's very clear that these kinds of data science initiatives and remote sensing initiatives are informed by stakeholder participation, which is very exciting for working in social good. Dr. Ye, did you want to answer as well?
Yeah, we are collaborating with like a forest scientist and also some some like staff and NGO companies, and definitely from from different perspective. Like companies, they mostly from industry and operational perspective. Like as I mentioned, like we are developing like a near real-time monitoring platform. So these companies provides us a very good insights on how to make our algorithm operational for doing like actual things, not just stay in the paper. And another group like forest scientists, they provide very good insights on for us to, yeah, they took our data set for their studies. And I know one of group, they took our understory build, like my colleague did the understory. They use our understory map to do their like a species habitat analysis. So yeah, I've been seeing a lot of collaboration on the input output. Yeah.
Nice, awesome to hear. Again, it seems like that both the dynamic nature and the baselining that you've mentioned must be very useful to these stakeholders. Thank you. And for my final question, I wanted to ask both of you how scientists and researchers who might not have a deep technical or math background can still provide novel insights. Obviously, your work with the classification methods and random forests were like visually striking and very informative. But to cater to all of these different levels, we're seeing strong math backgrounds and people just getting started. Okay.
I think the one of the trick here is I think we should do a good visualizations to help these people to capture the messages. So I spend a lot of time just to make beautiful maps to showing just 2D maps, 3D maps to convey the information. That's the first thing coming to my mind. I think visualization is very important. Yeah.
Dr. Buzz?
Yeah, so I'm thinking a little bit off just off the top of my head here, but to make it more accessible, I think one thing that we can do is, for example, stress things that are just relatable to the person, to an average person. So for example, change detection, you can see very clearly from one image to the next. I think my internet may be unstable again, but yeah, just looking at things that are striking. So changes in color, changes in plant spread.
Yeah, well, as was mentioned in the chat, Jennifer, definitely try turning off your video. Yeah. Okay, thank you for your answer, Dr. Buzz. So that was all the questions. That's all the questions I had for you. Thank you guys very much for your time. If you have any closing remarks, please continue.
Sorry about that internet problem, but thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to hear about what the innovations come out of this innovation challenge. And hopefully, although this time you're using Landsat data, I hope in the future that hyperspectral data and maybe the Orbital Sidekick data specifically can come into play for similar projects for the public good. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Ye?
Yeah, I'm very looking forward to what will coming out from your computations, and because it's really aligned well with my own research, and yeah, so yeah, definitely I want to see, because sometimes I feel like I was stuck at the pattern of the pathway that I used to. So from different domain, different perspective, probably I will get new ideas from your computations. So that's the reason I'm so looking forward.
Of course. And it seems like we had some great new ideas today, great conversation, and a lot of excitement in the community for this challenge. Everyone should be in the Slack for this. So if you are excited to reach out to anyone, either the speakers or a fellow audience member, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I wanted to say thank you all for your time and for an amazing discussion. This has been this month's special interest group.
Thank you too.
Post the Slack link. Will do.
Thank you all.
Handing off to
we
Tom.
will be sending a Slack link, and actually we'll send an email to everyone as well with more information about the challenge and how you can get involved. We'll actually be having an information session on March 8th. And so again, we will send more information about that and look forward to everyone registering. But that's it for us now. And thank you all for attending today. And we look forward to seeing you participating in our Open Innovation Challenge. Thank you so much.